Everybody's crying. My kids are crying. Jackie's crying. I'm crying. And this fundamentally changes the way I think about disease and health. It will change the way I practice medicine, and it will change the focus of my clinical research.
Yeah.
And I've since made it my mission to teach the public that there's so much that we can do to change the course of our illness, to teach clinicians how to use these concepts in their clinical practice, and to do the research that will change the standard of care. The current understanding of progressive MS is incomplete. How much recovery might be possible?
I am Lisa Roers, former executive coach turned podcaster and digital course creator. Just a few years ago, my typically unwavering optimism was put to the test when my autoimmune system went sideways and handcuffed my dreams to positively impact the world. Fast forward, though, through years of failed experiments, dozens of doctors, and countless hours of research, and I am now a healthy, thriving CEO of a business that is positively impacting the world by empowering people to exchange fear for fortitude and dis-ease for durability. I created the Sunshine Cafe podcast to give you strategies to be your best self-advocate so you can focus on the things which light you up. If you're looking for hope and encouragement to live a life you love, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe podcast. My guest today is known around the world for her pioneering research and success in reversing chronic and progressive multiple sclerosis. In 2018, she was awarded the Institute for Functional Medicine's Linus Pauling Award. She's the author of The Wahls Protocol, a radical new way to treat all chronic autoimmune conditions using paleo principles, and the cookbook, The Wahls Protocol, Cooking for Life. Dr. Terry Wahls is an Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner and conducts clinical trials in the setting of multiple sclerosis with the goal of changing how we clinically treat this disease and others like it. She knows this area very well, and in this episode, you'll hear why. She has lived through it as both doctor and patient. It's important for us to remember that science is ever evolving. What we know today to be true is only true until we observe a new and different outcome, effect, or improvement. In 2008, Dr. Wahls was banned as a speaker, condemned, and all sorts of terrible things were said about her, calling her ideas and her fact-based research dangerous. Fast forward a few years, and today she's being celebrated as one of the most important and leading dietary research investigators in the setting of multiple sclerosis. She is a highly sought-after keynote speaker making strides in medicine that will surely impact millions of lives, and is already doing just that. Grab your notepad and paper or open up your notes app on your device. There is so much good information in this episode. You might need to listen twice. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed interviewing Dr. Terry Wahls. Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe, everyone. This episode is for the doubters. Anyone out there who's heard some of our stories already about people healing themselves from changing diet, but kind of have been sitting on the sidelines, not sure if they believe it. Well, today is your day. Terry, thank you and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just back up a little bit. Maybe our listeners aren't as familiar with your work. Could you give them an overview of your story and how you got to where you are now?
So I'm an internal medicine physician, and in retrospect, everything began during medical school back in 1980. And I'd had some episodes of electrical face pain for about 20 years and gradually getting worse, more troublesome. Then I started having difficulty with my left leg, started stumbling, saw a neurologist who, did an exam and said, Terry, this could be bad or really, really bad. And then, we began doing the test. And so over the next 3 weeks, I'm in bed laying awake at night thinking about the fact I've had 20 years of progressively worse electrical face pain. And I know I have clearly some sort of progressive disorder. So actually, I'm praying for a rapidly fatal diagnosis. I don't want to become disabled. 2 weeks later, I hear multiple sclerosis. I do my research. I find the best MS center in the country. I see their best physician. I take the newest drugs. 3 weeks later, I hear tilt, recline, wheelchair. And my disease has converted from relapsing remitting MS to secondary progressive MS. I get my tilt, recline wheelchair, take mitochondria. It does not help. That's a form of chemotherapy. I take tizabri. That's the new biologic that everyone is so excited about. That does not help. Then I'm switched to Cellcept, another immune suppressant drug. And that's when I have to ask myself, am I really doing all that I can? Because, I'm still mentally clear. And so I decided to go back to reading PubMed. And I start reading the basic science articles, animal models of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ALS, Huntington's disease. And I decide that the mitochondria dysfunction is what's driving disability. So I eventually create a supplement cocktail to support my mitochondria, and that slows my decline. And I'm very grateful. But I am still declining. And in 2007, I can no longer sit up. I'm in a zero gravity chair with my knees higher than my nose. That's how I staff the resident clinic. That's how I take my meals at home. And I discovered a study using electrical stimulation of muscles in people who are paralyzed, who are never going to walk again. I asked my physical therapist, can I try that? He says, well, yes, we can do that. We'll grow bigger muscles for you, but I'm not sure your brain can talk to those muscles. I might be making it harder to take the few steps that you can take. But he does give me a test session. It hurts bad, really bad. But when it's over, I feel great. My therapist says it's probably from the endorphins. So we add the electrical stimulation of muscles, or E-stim as he calls it, to my exercise program, which is just 10 minutes. Because if I do more than that, I can't function for the next 48 hours. And then my chief of staff pulls me into his office and tells me he's going to send me to the traumatic brain injury clinic. He describes the job. I go home and tell my wife, Jackie. He goes, Terry, there's no way you can do that. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And come January, when I have to go to the clinic, I'll either be able to do this or not. And then I'll have to finally apply for medical retirement. So I'm pretty bummed by all of that. But I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. I take their course on neuroprotection, and I have a longer list of supplements, and I add them.
Yeah.
And then I have this interesting aha. Like, what if I redesign the paleo diet that I've been following for 5 years based on this long list of supplements I'm taking from mitochondria?
So trying to get the supplements in more of their natural form instead
in
of
the food. And the assumption is that there's probably more things in the food, because the food is much more complicated.
Sure.
That would be really good for me. So that's a couple more months of research. And I'll start this new way of eating December 26, 2007. Now, for everyone who's listening to this, at this point, I want you to know just how disabled I am.
Yeah.
My electrical face pain, the trigeminal neuralgia, is relentlessly worse. It's getting much more difficult to turn off. I can take a few steps using 2 walking sticks. I can no longer sit up. I have a zero gravity chair that I staff the resident clinic in, another one at home. I haven't been able to go out to eat or to movies in years because I can't sit up. Mm-hmm. It's hard to drive the 10 minutes it takes to get to work. And of course, I'm coming to terms with, I know I am beginning to have some brain fog. I am probably going to have to take medical retirement. And so it's very clear, as I look at the 27 years of worsening trigeminal neuralgia, 7 years of worsening MS, and I'm really quite young. I'm only 52. I'm on track to become bedridden by my illness, demented by my illness, and probably die with intractable, horrific pain.
Yeah.
So I start this new way of eating. January comes, and I have to go to the traumatic brain injury clinic. The first 2 weeks in clinic, I'm just going to watch my partners examine these veterans with traumatic brain injuries. Well, I should be able to watch. That
doesn't take as much energy, right? If I'm just watching.
Just watching.
Yeah.
And then the third week of January, I need to start examining and writing the notes. And the first day, I come home and, and Jack says, how was it? So, well, it's not too bad. And then on Friday, so I've done it all week. She goes like, well, it's not too bad. And then I say, honey, I want to sit in a regular chair. So we get a regular chair, and that's how I joined the family for supper.
For the first time for a long time.
In years.
Yeah. How long had you been on the modified paleo diet at that point?
I'd been doing the modified paleo diet 5 years.
Okay.
So, and I'd been doing supplements for 4 years, and modified paleo for 5 years. So, and everyone who's listening, the supplements, truly very helpful. The modified paleo slowed my decline, but didn't reverse it.
Right.
The electrical stimulation was certainly very helpful. Things were beginning to improve. But, when I redesigned that paleo diet, I'm still doing my electrical stim. I'm still taking all my supplements. But, I'm getting stronger.
Right.
And when I see my physical therapist, he goes, Terry, you're definitely stronger. I can now do exercises 10 minutes twice a day. Then he moves it up to 15 minutes twice a day. Then 20 minutes twice a day. Then half an hour twice a day. And then I start walking in the hallways with my 2 walking sticks. And then, of course, that just stuns my partner. It's like, oh my God, are you on that Tizabri? And I go, well, no, I'm not. And by then I've gone back to my neurologist who, sees me walk in. And they're like, oh my God.
Right. They're used to seeing you roll in, not walk in.
So I walk in. And, he's, of course, very, very excited. And then in May, and actually it's Mother's Day, I told Jackie, I want to try riding my bike, which I've not done in 6 years. We have an emergency family meeting. My children don't want me to do that because they don't want to risk my falling.
Sure, of course.
Getting
That
hurt.
create you could break something.
A bigger problem.
Something else, exactly.
But Jack says, no, we'll let her try. And so she tells my big 6'5", 16-year-old son, Zach, you run alongside on the left. She tells my 13-year-old daughter, Zebby, you run alongside on the right, and she'll follow. We all get into position.
So you have people like training wheels all around you.
all around, ready to make sure I don't get into trouble.
Sure.
And we get into position, and Jack gives the all clear, and I push off, and I bike around the block.
Wow.
And of course, that big 16-year-old boy, he's crying. Zebby is crying. Jackie's crying. And when I relive that moment, tears still come to my eyes because all of my physicians, through the whole course of being cared for, have told me when you have secondary progressive multiple sclerosis, functions once lost are gone. And so I'm like, the current understanding of progressive MS is incomplete. How much recovery might be possible?
So that kind of opened up the light that there's more here
there's more that's possible. And so every day, I was already, really working out every day, and I'd figured out how to work out while I was at work. And I'm biking a little bit further every day. And so in October, Jackie comes home and says, honey, I just signed us up for the Courage Ride. It's 18.5 miles. However far you go, honey, will be a triumph. Now, at that point, the farthest I'd gone was 8 miles, which,
was a lot.
Was really a lot. And it was up and down.
Around the block was a wonder. Right.
Yeah. So I finished it, 18.5 miles.
Wow.
And, once again, when we crossed the finish line, everybody's crying. My kids are crying. Jackie's crying. I'm crying. And this fundamentally changes the way I think about disease and health. It will change the way I practice medicine, and it will change the focus of my clinical research. Yeah. And I've since made it my mission to teach the public that there's so much that we can do to change the course of our illness, to teach clinicians how to use these concepts in their clinical practice, and to do the research that will change the standard of care.
Yes. In fact, you have made it your mission to create an epidemic of health, right? That is one of the best missions I can think of.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because all throughout that whole journey, Dr. Wahls, you were treating patients. You were truly the doctor who became the patient.
Yeah. I learned a lot in medical school. I learned a lot in residency, internal medicine. And then there's another level of education you get when you develop a chronic progressive disease that is not responsive to the best treatments that we have to offer. And, some physicians like, okay, that's all there is. And they just accept that. And there are other of us who are like, well, they ask the question, am I doing all that I can? And then they're like, well, but I could learn. I could
Yeah.
study and learn, and I could begin to self-experiment. And fortunately for me, that's what I was willing to do.
Yeah. Well, it's a whole different story when you are taught that certain medicines help a situation. And then when you are actually experiencing the ailment and those medicines aren't helping, you have a whole new level of motivation to try some different things. So you have had a lot of reason to try.
And there were things that were helpful. I have trigeminal neuralgia when I finally got placed on gabapentin, and that helped manage my pain considerably. It didn't completely take it away, but it made it much more bearable. Profoundly grateful for that. And salbutamol, when I'd have an acute flare, that could be very helpful. And the highly effective DMTs as a group do a really very good job of turning off the acute lesions, the new enhancing lesions, the new relapses. But they don't do a good job of preventing the conversion to secondary progressive MS. They delay it by 5 years. They delay the time to wheelchair by 5 years. And, 5 years is great. 5 years is super helpful. But unless we fix the mitochondria, unless we get to the root causes, all these systemic autoimmune diseases will continue to be progressive.
Right. Yeah. Let's dive into that. There's so many things that you've said I would love to dig into deeper. You've talked about that supplement cocktail that you had gone to, and none of us who aren't trained the way you are trained will understand which supplements immediately to dive into. So what kinds of things did you go to first to try to boost your immune system or boost the healing process?
So let's talk a bit about mitochondria. Any cell that needs lots of energy, such as brain cells, heart cells, are really packed with mitochondria.
Okay.
And if the mitochondria can't make energy as efficiently, can't make what's called adenosine triphosphate or ATP, the functions assigned to that cell decline, which is why people with fatigue, with anxiety, depression, brain fog, or also heart failure have mitochondria that are struggling to make the amount of ATP. So it's like, okay, what could I do to support my mitochondria? B vitamins are important cofactors for many of the steps along the way for making ATP.
Okay.
In addition, coenzyme Q can be very helpful.
Okay.
In that, there are a couple of key minerals, and that would be zinc and magnesium. That can be very helpful. And then if everyone will think back to biology class, they remember those little ovals that were the mitochondria. In the middle of the oval are all these little squiggly lines. Those squiggly lines are the cell membranes that are inside the mitochondria that hold the proteins that are involved in making the ATP.
Okay.
To make cell membranes, you need a lot of fat. You need healthy fats, omega-3 fats, some omega-6 fats. And so most of us have plenty of omega-6. We don't have enough omega-3. So taking an omega-3 supplement will be very helpful.
Sure. The omega-6s are what we're getting from a lot of those seed oils and the vegetable oils and things like that, whereas the omega-3s are coming from things like flaxseed, chia seeds, some more of those healthier fats, like you were saying. Is that correct?
And grass-finished meats, and lamb, pasture-raised meats, pasture-raised beef, wild caught fish.
Okay, wonderful. So those are great go-tos. So your mitochondria is the furnace, if you will, of the cell.
Correct.
And what was happening, or maybe what's happening in all of our bodies that are approaching disease, is that mitochondria is not getting what it needs to have a healthy, vibrant furnace that creates the energy for our systems. So
exactly,
giving the body the right nutrients that it needs to rekindle that fire is really what you had discovered.
So when I was adding the supplements, I realized that was slowing the speed of my decline, that I was taking my supplements. I was still fatigued, but when it was sort of traditional internal medicine doc, we're very skeptical of supplements, nutraceuticals. So after the first 6 months of taking supplements, I thought, well, hell, I'm no better. Screw this.
This was a waste of time.
The waste of time, waste of money. I'm not doing it. And I couldn't get out of bed. I just really couldn't function. So after the third day, my wife said, honey, why don't you try these again? So I did. Okay. And the next morning I could get up and go to work. And I thought, wow, that was really interesting. So 2 weeks later, I said,
was it really just one night? You were better literally the next day after?
No, I was back to my usual level of function. Okay. So better is maybe a strong word.
Okay.
So I was back to my usual level of disability.
Okay, got it.
And so I thought, wow, that's really interesting. So I talked with Jackie. I want to try this again in 2 weeks. So 2 weeks later, I stopped all my supplements. At 36 hours, I just could not function, couldn't get out of bed. We waited the 3 days. I took the supplements again in the evening. And then the next morning, I was back to my usual level of fatigue, and I could go to work. So now I'm really excited. Like, okay, I'm figuring stuff out that my neurologist doesn't know to tell me. My primary care doc doesn't know to tell me. And
it's repetitive. You were able to replicate it more than once.
I could repeat it. Yeah. So by then, I had been a member of the University of Iowa Institutional Review Board, and this is the committee that reviews research on humans to make sure that we're being safe. So I tell the IRB, give me the studies to review related to the brain, the neurologic stuff, the psychiatric stuff. That's what I want to review. So I was getting more and more comfortable reading the research, getting exposed to more ideas. And that's, how I would over time gradually add to the supplement list. I was getting better at reading the research. And also that's how I was exposed to the concept of electrical stimulation of muscles. So I was reviewing a study, and people who are paralyzed, again, never going to walk, they had been doing the electrical stimulation of muscles. The study would have been coming to an end, but the participants didn't want to stop. So they were asking permission to extend the study for another 3 years.
Wow.
So that got me like, wow, I wonder if anyone's ever done this for MS. And the answer to that was no. There had been a study in Parkinson's, a study in cerebral palsy. There were 212 papers that were out. It didn't take me that long to go through all of them. And that's when I made an appointment with my physical therapist. And I said, can I try this? And we had this very interesting conversation. And fortunately, he was willing to give me a test session.
Nice. You said that first one was pretty painful, but in general, that electrical stimulation, was that basically serving kind of as the workout you were unable to do? Or how was that getting your body going?
So for people who are paralyzed, they can't work out. Mm-hmm. So their muscles become atrophied very quickly. Their bones become thin very quickly. They develop central obesity. They developed metabolic syndrome, then prediabetes, then type 2 diabetes. They develop cholesterol problems, then a lot of atherosclerosis and heart disease.
Mm-hmm. Because they're not moving. They're not able to.
Because they're not moving. And it turns out our muscles are a big endocrine organ. They're really important to how we control our blood sugar, important to how we control our blood cholesterol. And what Dr. Shields was able to show was that by exercising people's thighs, you put electrodes on their quadriceps, on their hamstrings, and they did sit to stand exercises hooked up to their electrical pads.
Yep.
Of course, they're paralyzed, but it doesn't hurt them at all.
Because they can't feel anything, right?
They can't feel anything. But they could feel the cognitive improvement, the quality of life improvement.
Mhm.
Their bones were stable. Their muscles were stable. The blood cholesterol improved. Their insulin and blood glucose improved.
Mm.
So it was like, okay, this would be good for me because I can hardly work out.
Right.
And our understanding of what electrical stimulation does has improved these last 15 years. We now know that the electrical stimulation lets the body make more of what's called myokines. These are cytokines made by the muscles that will help you grow more muscles and more bone density locally. And also in the brain makes more nerve growth factors. And nerve growth factors help your brain have signals to repair myelin, to repair synapses. It is like fertilizer for the neurons,
Wow.
which is probably why I observed such a great and wonderful impact on my mood
Yeah.
after doing the electrical stimulation of muscles. That, yep, it hurt, but I felt so good afterward. And so, I was doing electrical stimulation of muscles. And even though I can walk, hike, bike, I can jog, I still do electrical stimulation of muscles as part of my strength training routine. And I expect that I'm still making a lot more myokines to have more muscles, better bone density. And I can still tell the improvements in mood and mental clarity after doing my electrical stimulation.
Wonderful. That is amazing.
And I talk about this in my book, The Wahls Protocol, that I think exercise is so important. Electrical stimulation is not a requirement. You don't have to do that. However, I make the observation that athletes who don't have medical problems, athletes, particularly the strength-based athletes, bodybuilders, wrestlers, sprinters, whether it's a racing sprint on land or in the water, these people get a huge benefit from doing electrical stimulation as part of the workout so they can build bigger, stronger, faster muscles.
Sure.
The athletes also use electrical stimulation to recover from injuries more quickly. So if you can't exercise, electrical stimulation will help you reduce the harm of inactivity.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to increase muscle mass more quickly, you could add electrical stimulation muscles. Again, not a requirement,
Yeah.
but helpful. Everyone should be exercising. There is certainly a growing body of research that tells us for the people who have difficulty exercising, severe disability, people who are bedbound, who require a walker or a cane, benefit from adding electrical stimulation to their strength training program.
For those of us who maybe don't have access to electrical stimulation, I'm able to do a workout, but I'm very intrigued by the electrical stimulation you're talking about. How does somebody, do you have to contact a physical therapist for such a thing? Or
So there are a variety of ways of looking for this. One is to call around for the physical therapy offices in your area and look for physical therapists who take care of athletes.
Okay.
Because the athletes are using electrical stimulation.
Interesting.
And now that physical therapist is not likely to have experience with multiple sclerosis. And so this will be some mutual education that you're going to have is that you'd like to add electrical stimulation to your rehabilitation program. If you don't have any physical motor impairments, this doesn't really add a whole lot. Just keep doing your exercises. Go to the gym, get a personal trainer, And I think you'll do really well.
So electrical stimulation especially for those who are maybe movement impaired. If you're not movement impaired, what kinds of exercises would you recommend maybe for people to start if they're not moving too much
Well,
yet?
just begin. I think it's really helpful to do things that you like doing, because if it's not fun and pleasurable, it's really hard to keep it up. If you can do things as a family, that's wonderful. So walks with your family can be lovely. Partner dancing with
Mm-hmm.
your spouse or friends, super helpful. But yoga, tai chi, swimming,
Okay.
jogging, brisk walking, Nordic walking,
Okay.
strength training, balance training, Pilates, all of these have research that shows benefit. Mhm. There's a wonderful paper out by the MS Working Group on physical activity and wellness. In their big recommendation is a goal of 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity every week, or 75 minutes of high intensity. And a mixture of aerobic strength training, balance training, stretching is ideal,
Okay.
but it should be fun.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't keep it up.
Right. Yeah. So these people who do the Zumba dancing and all the other stuff, they're having a great time and they're
Having
getting
a
a great
great
workout
time.
in.
And there's a lot to be said about combining exercise with music.
Mm-hmm.
Study after study has shown that exercise supplemented by music at the same time is super helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if we're doing an exercise that asks us to do two things at once, that also super helpful.
So like
And you could do
balancing while you're lifting, or for example, or something like that. Is that what you mean?
or balancing while you are turning your head,
Okay. Just simple.
or doing dancing while you're reacting to what your partner is doing,
Mm,
or doing a martial arts form where you are going through a precise, memorized set of steps.
got it.
Learning how to juggle, learning how to do macrame,
Mm,
knitting, crochet.
just these
Uh,
different ways to build different neural pathways in our brain.
Neural pathways, many different neural pathways.
Interesting.
There's a very basic concept. It takes a lot of resources to run our body. It takes a lot of resources to run our brain. And so what you're not using, you're going to reallocate resources from that parts of your brain or body, because all of our real estate is very expensive to maintain. And if you're not going to use it, we're going to put it somewhere else.
This is why I forget my Spanish words when I don't use them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So keep it up. If you're not doing something, it will quickly disappear.
Yeah.
And we continue to do research. In 2008, when I first began talking about diet and lifestyle, the message was controversial. It was condemned. I was banned as a speaker.
Wow.
All sorts of terrible things were said about me. People said that clearly I could not have had multiple sclerosis because you don't recover from progressive MS, that the physicians who had taken care of me were incompetent. And I'm like, well, okay, let's say that maybe they were right, that I never had MS. And then you have to say, well, what about the clinical research that I've done? And we tested my protocol in 20 other neurology verified diagnoses of progressive multiple sclerosis, either secondary, primary progressive MS.
The 20 other
And
patients who had
20
it.
other patients, followed
Got
them
it.
for a year. They did my protocol. And we remarkably reduced their fatigue, improved their quality of life, improved their thinking ability, reduced their anxiety, reduced their depression. And in half of them,
Wow.
we improved their walking function. In people with progressive MS, where you anticipate a 10 to 15% worsening of walking function every year,
And you're told over and over again that it cannot be reversed.
that it cannot be reversed. And that is the standard understanding of progressive MS even now.
Yeah.
And then we wrote multiple grants to try and replicate that. I wasn't getting funding. So then I narrowed it, and we just started following just the diet. And so we've done diet studies looking at the keto diet, the paleo diet, a low saturated fat diet. And consistently, we have found that implementing any one of those 3 diets leads to reduced fatigue, improved quality of life, reduced anxiety, reduced depression, and improved walking endurance. Now, and we're in our 8th clinical trial. We have the largest effect size so far that we've seen is for the paleo diet, but the keto diet can be helpful. The low saturated fat diet can be helpful. Other studies have shown that the Mediterranean diet can be helpful. So the one diet that consistently researchers have been able to show is that the standard American diet leads to worse fatigue, worse anxiety, worse depression, worse quality of life, declining walking endurance.
More and more disease, yes.
More and more disease. And so for all of your listeners, I encourage you and your family to sit down and talk about what could we do to improve our diet? What foods could we stress? What foods are we going to reduce or eliminate? And make these changes as a family. Because we're addicted to processed foods. They're cheap, they're plentiful, they're everywhere. We have craving if we're not eating them. So if they're in our line of sight, we're going to eat them.
Yep.
If you want to stop eating them, you have to take them out of your line of sight. And if you want to eat more foods that are good for you, you and your family, I encourage you to look at things you could do to improve your skill and comfort with meal planning, with some recipes, some cooking, so that it will become easier to make wonderful, nutritious food. And for those who say, I'm not a doctor, I don't have lots of money, I can't do this because it's too expensive. Well, the Iowa City Veteran Affairs Hospital saw my remarkable success with my trach ranger clinics, with my primary care vets. They pulled me out of primary care, let me create a new clinic called the Therapeutic Lifestyle Clinic. And I went to specialty medicine, the primary care, the pain clinic. I said, give me your most difficult cases, people who are suffering that you can't really seem to help. Let them know that I'm not giving them new drugs. We're just going to work with them on diet and lifestyle. And we had a few people to come at first, and we had remarkable success, which led to a few more, led to a few more, led to a few more. And then, I'm having to reimagine how I'm running my clinic because I don't want people to have to wait a year to come see me. So we go from small group classes to larger group classes to larger group classes to very big classes. And I'm seeing people living on food stamps in rural Iowa, rural Missouri, rural Illinois, shopping in small grocery stores in these rural towns. They're not buying organic food. They're just doing the best they can. Although it is interesting that over time, they do figure out how to get more organic foods into their diet. So, but again, these are people living on food stamps. And we saw remarkable health transformations. We taught them. We had these wonderful classes coming in with chefs teaching us cooking, with personal trainers, physical therapists, occupational therapists teaching us movement classes, with health psychologists talking about motivation, about getting in touch with our why, how to grow our resilience, how to find meaning in life. And people were extraordinarily successful.
You're handling the mind and the body and the whole physical, the diet. You're kind of addressing the whole package, which is the only effective way, I think, to become a fully healed person.
We have to address everything.
Yeah.
In science, we want to study one molecular pathway at a time. And that's what gets funded by the National Institutes for Health. There's single molecular pathway studies, very reductionistic thinking. In our cells, everything is connected to everything else.
Right.
Everything is connected.
Yeah.
So an intervention that allows people to address as many things as they can in a step-by-step fashion will be much more successful.
Correct. And changing a diet is actually not as bad as I think a lot of people immediately think. Because our foods in the standard American diet, which ironically is called the SAD diet, it's genetically engineered to be crave-inducing. So you end up eating more of it, which is more expensive than eating a healthy apple or a rounded whole food diet.
What I want people to realize is I batch cook. I'll cook meals 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay.
And then, yes, we'll have leftovers. I'll freeze things. And tonight I'm going to warm up some lamb that we had on Thanksgiving. And we'll have a big salad with that lamb and some green sauce, which is basically a basil pesto over the lamb. It'll be really quite lovely.
It does sound good.
Yeah. And if you batch cook and you'll learn how to make some recipes that you can then either have later in the week or freeze and have the following week, it's super helpful. I don't have enough. I'm busy enough. I don't feel like cooking breakfast, lunch, and supper. 3 meals a day, every day. It's like way too much work. So what I like to do is to cook 2 to 3 meals in the week that I can then recycle. It makes it so much easier. And if you get food ingredients that you'll use to make your recipes, it is much less expensive than buying the boxed processed foods that, by the way, have all these food-like chemicals that have been added to them that have deleterious health effects.
Right.
But spices are good for us. Meats, fish, poultry are good for us. If you're vegetarian or vegan, legumes and rice can be good for us. Quinoa can be good for us. Non-starchy vegetables, particularly good for us. Yams, squashes, also good for us. Greens, incredibly good for us. Filled with calcium, magnesium, carotenoids, nitrates, lutein, zeaxanthin, mesozeaxanthin. It's vital for us. White bread, added sugar, terrible for us. Delicious, terrible.
Delicious, but terrible, right? Yeah. I love the concept of batching it and making things all at one time that you can kind of spread throughout the week and do your leftovers. That does save a lot of time and also makes it a little bit more efficient. Do you have recipes in here to share with people, or do you have?
Yep. There are a bunch of recipes in there.
Oh yeah.
And if people talk about liver being terrible, actually, liver and onions is one of our family's favorite meals. And so I talk about how to make liver and onions, have it be delicious. We have several liver recipes that are quite delicious in there.
Good. My husband and I often joke that anybody who doesn't like a certain kind of food probably just hasn't had it prepared correctly.
Correct.
When we grew up, all of the vegetables were canned and, soggy and not very tasty.
And part of what happened when we grew up, we became low fat. And when we go low fat, vegetables are often bitter. And that bitter makes the children go,
right.
And, we're going to resist that. But if you have fat, that cuts the bitterness. And if you add a little citrus or vinegar, that will also cut the bitterness. Yeah. So one of the techniques that we used with our veterans in the lifestyle clinic, we'd have some kale or sometimes dandelion greens I'd bring in, and we'd pass around the leaf and ask people to tear off a leaf and chew on it. I'd be very bitter, like, oh my God, that's terrible. There's no way I'm eating that. So we understand that. So if there are meat eaters and they were okay with eating bacon, we would fry up bacon to a desired level of doneness and then pull out the bacon, chop it up, put that aside, add the greens and stir until the greens are wilted. So for
in the
dandelion
bacon
greens, in the bacon grease.
Yeah.
So in the dandelion greens, that would be like 30 seconds. If it was kale, that'd be like 2 minutes. Then we add just a splash of citrus, lemon juice, or a splash of apple cider vinegar in the chopped bacon.
Yeah.
And we serve the bacon and greens. And the vets are like, oh my God, that is delicious. I say, okay, go home. This is the basic recipe. And if it wasn't delicious, double the bacon and do it again. We had people who, did not eat bacon for a variety of reasons. And then we did all of that with ghee. Then the other recipe that we did, so that was the cooked greens. I realized, okay, cooked greens could be really quite good.
Yeah.
Then the next thing that we would do is that we would take a cup of chopped greens, a cup of grapes, a cup of ice, a cup of water, and a couple of tablespoons of olive oil, and blend that in a high-speed blender. And then we'd give them some samples of the green smoothie. And they're like, that's delicious. I think my children will all love that. So what we taught them is we could take a food that was so bitter and objectionable, but prepared the correct way, became delicious.
Exactly. And when I was going through my healing journey, I had to keep reminding myself that the food is my medicine. And that sometimes when you eat your medicine, it's not all that tasty. I learned really quickly not, for example, don't juice broccoli stalks. It's a really bad idea. Don't juice those. They do not taste good. But the process of juicing things and drinking what my dear friends would call my green sludge or green goo ended up being the medicine that I needed to heal. So we sometimes just changing how we think about the food and giving ourselves the opportunity to try it ends up really opening up a lot of new opportunities to get fresh greens and vegetables and fruits into our diets.
And with your family, your kids, talking about the importance of food and the building blocks for restoring health and vitality, for helping them have plenty of energy, helping them have a better mood, clearer skin, better athletic performance. It can be very helpful.
Very, very true. You had your journey was starting basically around the year 2000. We're basically 2024. How are you feeling?
How am I now? Well, I can jog 20 minutes on my treadmill. I was up at the Rocky Mountain National Park and hiked up to 12,000 feet.
Wow.
And I mean, I was really quite surprised myself, like, wow, a 3-hour hike in the Rocky Mountains, like that felt really very, very good.
Yeah, that's a lot better than lying in a zero gravity chair, I'd say. It's a lot more living. Yeah.
Absolutely. Doing clinical research. We'll be presenting our research at the America's Committee on Treatments and Research in Multiple Sclerosis in February. I'm very excited about that. We presented our research at the Clinical Consortium of MS Centers in May this year. We had 4 research posters, 3 oral presentations.
Wow.
We've gone from, my ideas have gone from being dangerous and banned to being celebrated as one of the important and leading dietary research investigators in the setting of multiple sclerosis.
That is amazing. And if I didn't have a microphone in front of me, I would clap for that. That is fantastic. So you're no longer banned from speaking by presenting radical ideas.
Correct. I was just at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, gave a couple of lectures there to standing room only, talking about our research, and then talking to dozens of people after each lecture. You came up with one to have more questions.
Wonderful.
I do want to invite everyone in your tribe to come consider screening and being part of our next clinical trial. We have this wonderful study, the efficacy of diet and quality of life, comparing a ketogenic diet to the modified paleo diet to usual diet. You'll have to come to Iowa City, Iowa at month 0, month 3, month 24. You'll have a bunch of clinical tests of walking, hand, vision, thinking function, some surveys looking at mood, quality of life, and fatigue. And we'll have a research MRI that is no contrast at month 0 and month 24. This will be the largest and longest dietary study. And I'm so excited because we're including MRIs. We're saving a bunch of blood, so we'll be able to go back and analyze changes in the microbiome, changes in the blood biomarkers. And this is, it's my goal to change the standard of care. And to do that, we have to have high quality research that shows improvements can happen, and then that can investigate the mechanisms.
Exactly.
And so to learn more, go to terrywahls.com. Even if you don't have relapse remitting MS, please go and screen and agree to be part of the database, because every year we do a bunch of different kinds of studies, and you can be notified then about other studies for which you may be eligible.
Fantastic. We will definitely put that information, Dr. Wahls, also in the show notes so people have no problem finding that. They also can find you. Obviously, your website has a wealth of information.
Yes.
Your book here, The Wahls Protocol, is a fantastic, almost encyclopedia of information on how to heal and how to change your life so you can really be your self-advocate for good health. Dr. Terry Wahls, I am so grateful for all you're doing to change the world in this area and how we are addressing autoimmune and MS issues. Thank you for your work and your time, and just a pleasure to have you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So many key points in this episode. It was hard for me to narrow them down to just a few, but let's review them. Number 1, be your own self-advocate. Science is always changing, and if the understanding of progressive MS was as incomplete as Dr. Wahls experienced, well, then how much more recovery could be possible with other diseases as well? If you're ever told there is not a cure, at least in your own head, respond with a resounding yet. Partner with your doctor, bring the information to them, and become part of the process. That's what it means to be a self-advocate. Participate in the process. Number 2, get to the root cause. At time marker 1455 and on, Dr. Wahls talks about fixing the mitochondria and getting to that root causes. If you don't get to the root cause, all systemic autoimmune diseases will continue to be progressive. Our diseases are a result of broken cells, so we can't just band-aid the old issue with drugs or a short-term fix. We need a long-term patient process to make ourselves fully well. Number 3, out of sight, out of mind. We are addicted to processed foods. They're cheap, they're plentiful, and they are everywhere. So if they're in our line of sight, we are going to eat them. If you want to stop eating them, get them out of your line of sight. And I would recommend get them out of your house. If you're going to have bad food, make it only possible to have it outside of your home. Number 4, money is a poor excuse. For those who say that I can't do this because it's too expensive, Dr. Wahls proved to us that it does not need to be expensive and it does not take extra money. In fact, eliminating junk food will save you money. Number 5, time is a poor excuse. When you're changing your diet to eat better, it'll save you time to batch cook. Think smarter. Work smarter, not harder. So cook meals 2 or 3 at a time and build in some leftover meals into your week. Number 6, Dr. Wahls says, white bread and added sugar is terrible for us. Yes, it's delicious, but it's also terrible. Avoid it. It's hard to do, but so worth it. Number 7, movement and exercise is key. It is so important, not just for weight loss, but for bone density, for brain and nerve health. The cytokines made by the muscles will help you grow more muscles and more bone density. It also helps the brain and makes more nerve growth factors. Nerve growth factors help your brain have signals to repair myelin and to repair synapses. Everyone should be exercising. Number 8, everything is connected. So an intervention that allows people to address as many things as they can in a step-by-step fashion will be the most successful approach. Number 9, we can change the course of our illness. There is so much we can do to change the course of our illness. We just have to participate in helping teach clinicians how to use these new concepts in their practice. Again, partner with your practitioner and help bring that knowledge to the table. And finally, consider being part of the next clinical trial on how diet is impacting our health. The link is below in these show notes so you can take the survey to be screened and potentially participate in this movement to change clinical treatment of diseases. It is Dr. Wahls' goal to change the standard of care, and to do that, we have to have high-quality research to prove that improvements can happen through diet, and to know exactly what mechanisms it takes to do that. So consider participating and check out the link below. All right, if you enjoyed the content in this episode, please consider writing a quick review. Those reviews really help other people find the content that's valuable for them. And if you'd like to do something to help further research for how diet affects our health, please consider checking that link below in the show notes that will show you how to become part of that study. It also might just help you with accountability in your New Year's resolutions as well. Thank you for listening today, and thanks to all of you out there who are really working hard to spread the word about healthy eating, healthy living, and how great food and great healthy environments can help us all be fully well. God bless you and have a great week.